Ooh, getting all your book recommendations from TikTok is so cringe. Guilty. So right now, hashtag BOOKTOK has 77 billion views. That is insane. And the recommendations coming from these BOOKTOK videos are impacting the book charts, they're generating sales, and bookstores even have BOOKTOK displays, including this one in Denmark. Ariana, what are you doing here? So a year ago, I made this video right here, reading the books that I kept seeing all over my For You page. And now we're back with more books. TikTok said these are your For You pages. We have The Love Hypothesis, Bunny, My Dark Vanessa, Book Lovers, and It Happened One Summer. And I want to know if these books right here are more D'Amelio or D'Amelie no. So now let's D'Amelie go and read the books. Okay, this is the book that I'm starting with because frankly I can't escape it. It even has a sticker on it calling it a TikTok sensation. It's not a sticker! I can't get rid of that! Okay, so this is a romance based on science and maths. And if I were to draw a graph of how I found this, it would be like expectations, reality. After seeing this recommended so much, I was convinced it was gonna be quite good. But to my core, I am a hater. This is the hate hypothesis right now. The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood follows the fake dating trope between a PhD candidate and a professor at her university. I think that this trope is rarely done well. It's always predictable. You don't need a PhD to work out what's gonna happen here. It's inevitable. We know full well they're gonna end up together, and so we need great writing to get us through. And this didn't have it. It had nothing of the sort. I felt like the things that happened in this book were so stupid. The way they meet is because Olive, the PhD candidate, is trying to convince her friend that she is on a date with someone. But she doesn't have time to date. She's wedded to her studies. You choose looks, she chooses books. So she is actually in the lab, but then her friend turns up at the lab. So in a panic, just like any of us would, Olive kisses the closest person to her, who happens to be a big, large, ginormous, huge man. I'm telling you, this man's defining character trait is just that he is large and kind of mean. He also happens to be a professor at the university. There's a bit of light banter and joking about the fact that she kissed him without his consent, and therefore actually sort of sexual harassment, in a fun reminder that if you're attractive, you can do what you want, and if you're not attractive, you'll probably end up in jail. Not to linger on this point for too much longer, but I have more to say. I just found it so uncomfortable, I guess, that every time Olive was annoying, which was a lot, by the way, the professor would turn to her and be like, well, can always file that sexual harassment claim, right? Like, is that your flirting? Is your dirty talk a court case? I thought it was weird. Anyway, they end up fake dating and eventually real dating. That's not even a spoiler. I feel like that just happens in every fake dating romance ever. And there's this one scene which really just boiled my piss, because they go to a lecture and, oh, there's no seats. There's not enough space for everyone. She'll have to sit on his lap. On his lap, in a lecture, in an academic setting, in the place that he works, she sits on his lap throughout the lecture. It's just so silly. I'm sorry, I just couldn't get into this at all. And I don't mind when things are a little bit silly, as long as the writing is good, and I just didn't think that it was. BOOKTOK lied to me several times with this one. Although, fun fact, I did find out that this was originally Star Wars fan fiction, so that's quite fun, I guess. As you'll know if you watched my previous video, the ratings in this video are not just ratings, they're Addison ratings, right? And my Addison rating of this book is 2 out of 5 stars. Not approved by me. But you know what is approved by me? Reliably and undeniably 5 out of 5 stars. Adobe Creative Cloud. Creative Cloud is a collection of 20 plus apps. For example, Photoshop, Lightroom, and Premiere Pro. So whether you're interested in video or photography or design, I have great news for you, because did you know that Adobe has a student plan? Students and teachers can actually get 65% off full access to Creative Cloud. I'll put a little QR code on the screen right now, and also the link will be in my description for you to sign up. And included in this, you also get access to thousands of assets on Adobe Stock, Adobe Fonts, and 100 gigabytes of cloud storage. I'm on cloud 9 with that one. Creative Cloud is the perfect tool to help you express yourself and your creative projects and all your passions, and not only give you a creative outlet, but also help you to level up your skills, because there are loads of free tutorials as well. I personally have been using Lightroom to help improve the editing of the photos that I include in my writing newsletter, because I've been including these little pictures of the behind the scenes of my creative process, I guess. And I want them to have this kind of old school vintage effect, and the Lightroom presets are helping me to do that. It means that I can give them all the same filter, but also edit the intensity on each individual photo. So obviously I highly recommend. I will leave the QR code on the screen right now. And of course the link is in the description, so you can sign up to Adobe Creative Cloud. And if you're a student, make the most of that 65% discount. That's crazy. And now, speaking of crazy, let's move on to the next book, which I've heard some wild things about. Now this book I've personally been recommended a lot of times because I follow quite a lot of dark academia creators and they really like this. So I'm gonna give it a go. So I finished it, and what is going on in the House of Commons? On this channel, we support women's rights and also women's wrongs. And there has been a bit of a trend on TikTok recently of books that are unhinged and chaotic and center around female rage. So books like Boy Parts and Earthlings and My Sister the Serial Killer spring to mind. And then this is Bunny. This is essentially where those books meet The Secret History and also The Girls. And it all gets blended up into one mad, surreal cocktail. This book is absurd. It's ridiculous in the best possible way. It's about a group of girls who are rich and privileged and wear nice little summer dresses and eat sweet foods, and they're all writing students, and also they are in a murderous cult. So there's that. there's that to unpack. The novel gets its name because each of these girls refers to each other as Bunny. We then follow the perspective of a fifth girl, and she is at university and shares a seminar with the Bunnies. Side note, it's called Warren University because bunnies live in a warren. Get it? And despite initially having this real hatred for this group of girls, she is one day invited to join one of their meetings, and she sort of falls down the rabbit hole of their sick and twisted world. And then it just spirals from there and becomes increasingly crazy and just untethered. This book is bonkers and wild, and I loved it. You literally never know what is about to come when you turn the page. I don't even know how to describe it to you without spoilers because I feel like the shock value is part of the experience of reading this. All I'll say is that it's sinister and weird and loads of fun. This is Mean Girls or Clueless, but for the dark academia babes. One thing I have seen on TikTok when people are reviewing this book is that they say it starts to sort of lose its way at the end, or it gets a bit too strange to understand, but I feel like that's the point. I think there are supposed to be a lot of unanswered questions and open endings. Yes, the book is wild, but it's also a satire. I feel like the author probably had a lot of fun writing this, and I highly enjoyed reading it. I would recommend hopping to the bookstore and getting yourself a copy of this book. And I also really hope they turn it into a movie. That would be so cool. Okay, forgot to say, but my rating of this book is 4.25 out of 5. So I've been spending the last few days organizing my book collection, so maybe the less we say about that, the better. I don't know. If we don't acknowledge the chaos, it's not happening. Anyways, the next book that my TikTok feed said is for you is this book. This is My Dark Vanessa, and oh my god, I will never ever forget reading this. The final line gave me goosebumps all over my body. It was so beautifully concluded. And I think the book in general is just stunningly executed. Like, you speak a word against my baby, and we're gonna have a problem, because I thought this book was fantastic. Huge trigger warning here, because this does depict an abusive relationship between an adult and a minor, and it's a sort of response to and conversation with the book Lolita. Now, Nabokov's book Lolita depicts the perspective of a paedophile, whereas this book depicts the perspective of the victim. And her name is Vanessa. Now, she becomes obsessed with the book Lolita, and so there's this constant sort of dialogue with that book. And it's very clever because My Dark Vanessa, the title of this book, is actually a quote taken from another Nabokov book. That book is called Pale Fire, and the quote goes, "Come and be worshipped, come and be caressed. My dark Vanessa, crimson barred, my blessed." So I thought it was really interesting to read something that is kind of in modern conversation with a classic book. And I think this is necessary to that canon of literature. And obviously there's a bit of a grey area here and a bit of a blurred line where it's like, I enjoyed the book, I enjoyed the piece of art that has been created of this, whilst equally recognizing that the themes are absolutely horrendous and horrific and awful. I think there's a crucial difference here between subject and the art that is created as a result of it. And that's a very important distinction. Vanessa is groomed by her teacher when she's 15 years old. And she sort of sees him as the great love of her life. And he continues to consume her thoughts all throughout adulthood until another victim comes forward. And so we follow Vanessa in two ways. Firstly, we have when she's a child and she's experiencing this for the first time. And then secondly, we have her later on in adult life, kind of grappling with this and navigating it, and at first denying and then eventually understanding her trauma. And so My Dark Vanessa is a study of the treatment of victims, both by their peers and by the press, the sometimes hideous and degrading bureaucracy that is involved in bringing a claim forward, hierarchies of power and who is believed, especially within institutions like a school, the gaslighting behaviors of abusers and predators, and then also the power of memory and how we interpret and trust our own recollection of events. And then finally, this book is also about how different people respond to trauma. So there's so much to unpack here. There's so much that is unpacked within the book, and it paints this portrait of a girl turned woman, which is just mesmerizing and captivating and spellbinding. It's a story of a survivor, and it's profoundly moving. It may be called My Dark Vanessa, but it sheds so much light, and I think it's a really important book that made me want to violently sob. And so now, after reading Bunny and My Dark Vanessa, I can safely say that if I had a nickel for every time a BOOKTok book has made my jaw drop this week, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice, right? My Dark Vanessa gets 4.5 stars from me. I want to say that I enjoyed it, but I was also horrified by it, but I think it's a really amazing book. And now onto something a little less intense. You know, life is all about balance, so I think it's time for something light and fluffy. It Happened One Summer is happening right now. Okay, I liked this. I really, really liked this. I can appreciate a cracking romance when I read one, and this was it. It's like enemies to lovers, grumpy ex-sunshine, small town romance vibes. And at first, I gotta say, in the first maybe like 60 pages, I thought it was so cringeworthy. And then I did a full 180. With this book, once you embrace the cheese, it is delicious. My compliments to the chef. So we essentially have this Hollywood socialite called Piper, classic romance book name. Anyways, her life is falling apart. Relatable. She's causing all sorts of chaos and throws a party that ends up getting her arrested. And so, to teach her a lesson, her stepfather sends her to the fishing village that her dad, who died, was from, to basically spend some time there working in the local pub. So she goes to this old port town and, of course, ends up meeting a hunk. There's a lot of tension, but they have soft spots for each other, which are actually really believable and understandable. I don't know, their feelings and their interactions felt very authentic and real, and I liked that. And I also would say, I think that the author, Tessa Bailey, deliberately makes Piper a little bit obnoxious and insufferable at first, because she has this amazing character arc. The character development is great, and you really end up warming to her as a reader. Of course, these two people fall in love, but what I liked is that they were whole, fully fleshed out characters before they met each other, and then when they do collide, they sort of just better each other and bring out the best in each other rather than changing themselves fundamentally. So I liked the impact that these two characters kind of had on each other. And you know what? It's a good thing this man works on a boat, because the ship has sailed. I ship these two. There's also great peripheral characters and kind of subplots that exist in the novel outside of the romance, which is really important for me. I really like when we get to focus on other bonds and other relationships that people have. And like the love hypothesis, there are some really stupid details, like the fact that she has 3 million Instagram followers and yet notices when he makes an anonymous account and follows her. Like, in what world would this character with 3 million followers have her notifications switched on? Her phone would literally explode. Anyway, it's a minor detail. What I will say is, don't let the cutesy cover fool you. This is spicy and steamy and sexy. And it's hot. Filthy in the best possible way. I thought this was good. My Addison rating is 4 stars. No one is more surprised by this than me. Anyway, moving on. I'm not scared of lions and tigers and bears, but I'm scared of how BOOKTok is going to react to this review. Because Emily Henry is like the patron saint of BOOKTok. And I don't think I've seen any book with more hype than this one over the past couple months. And when I saw this title, Book Lovers, I was like, that's me. Is this play about us? This is a romance book with my name on it. And so, all of that considered, I can't believe how underwhelming I found this book. I literally feel scared to say that. They're gonna come for me. They're gonna cancel me. I just couldn't get into this book at all. I actually had the complete opposite experience with It Happened One Summer, because at first I thought this had a lot of potential. It starts off with this prologue where it's like, I'm not like other romance books. It kind of talks about how predictable some tropes are and how every romance book is the same, and sets up something that I thought was going to be really good and then ended up just being really mediocre. In fact, it was kind of just a less good version of It Happened One Summer. And at least It Happened One Summer is a bit daft but owns it, you know? This book, I couldn't get into it at all. So this book is essentially about a literary agent who goes to a small town to get away from the city and see what happens if she's in a new environment. And who happens to own the local bookstore? None other than her arch nemesis, who happens to be very attractive. He is a book editor and they have a lot of tension kind of in their working life. And so I think the point of this book was to sort of flip tropes on their head by having someone who leaves the city and takes their work elsewhere and then ends up falling in love with someone they were working with anyway. But I honestly felt like the writing was so tame and a bit boring. Maybe because I just read It Happened One Summer, which is like overflowing and abundant with personality. This one just didn't click for me. I'm confused, you're confused, we're all confused. Also, without spoilers, this book had a style of ending that always gets me. Like, I always enjoy that kind of ending, and yet it sort of just fell flat. I don't think it did anything for me because I just didn't care about any of the characters. I felt completely indifferent to anything that happened. It was just so aggressively average. The love interest isn't developed as a character at all. He is so dull and one-dimensional, and honestly, I've had more sexual chemistry with my morning toast. I was like indifferent about whether these two people ended up together, and that's not the point. Also, because one of the kind of motifs is the fact that they're book lovers, they work in the publishing industry, there are quite a few literary references, but I felt like they were kind of just a bit lazy. I don't know what went wrong for me here. I felt like all the ingredients were right there, and then the chef just tossed them in the air and put them all in the wrong order. I don't know, it didn't taste good. There was no seasoning. It was bland. I was not a lover of this book. It's getting 2.5 stars from me. And that is the last Addison rating of this video. Will I still read Emily Henry's next book? Sure. It's one flop, not a flop era. And so with that, that brings us to the end of this video. Okay, here are all the books. Some of these were a smash, and some of these were a pass. In fact, we kind of started and ended with my least favourite books. It was like a sandwich with a great filling and then 2 slices of bread that were just old and mouldy and gross. And I'll leave you with that image in your head. You're welcome. If you would like to follow me over on TikTok for my BOOKTok videos, then my username is @JackBenEdwards. I would love to see you over there. In fact, if you come from this video, comment on one of my most recent videos with like the cowboy hat emoji and I'll know. A massive shout out, of course, goes to Adobe for sponsoring this video and supporting my channel. I really, really appreciate it. The QR code to sign up to Adobe Creative Cloud is right here and the link is in the description for you to get 65% off if you're a student. And let me know in the comments which books I've missed, which books are always coming up on your For You page, and maybe, just maybe, I'll make a part 3. Until next time, all the best, stay in touch, have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye!